Welcome back to the Shire. Hobbit Racing. Tony here. Thanks for joining me. It's part 2, where we start to see some of the tuning aspects of this beautiful MRSlotcar Shadow DN4 take shape. Let's see what happens in part 2. And oh, by the way, let me take a moment. I want to thank all my subscribers, especially my new subscribers out there. The channel's starting to gain a lot of momentum. So if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications, and give me some feedback. It's really helping out this channel. So I want to say thanks to everybody out there. With that said, let's check out part 2. Next, we're gonna disassemble this side of the car, the back, and we're gonna break in that motor slowly. And as with all the other parts for MRSlotcar currently, we are still using the 1.3, so kind of think like NSR. And if you want to leave things intact and you don't want to take the bushings out, you're going to have to be a little bit creative because it hangs below. So there is also an axle spacer, if I'm not mistaken, we're about to find out, just inside that spur gear. So you're going to have to slide the axle out so that you can get the gear up and away from the plastic that's holding it in the bottom. So when you slide this axle out, be prepared to have a spacer fall below. So maybe set it down and watch and see what happens. And now it's fallen and the gear's fallen, and there, as I'll go ahead and grab it right now, you should be able to see, if I grab it right there, that additional spacer. That is the gear side. And that is the non-gear side. And there's our 34. I don't think we're going to be staying 34. I might pop it in there and just see what 1134 does. It's super low, super high gear ratio, super low gear for this track. Rapid takeoff, no doubt, I'm sure. Polish this axle up too while we're at it. But probably not. A lot of times this track does super well with high torque motors in the 2.3s, 2.4s, 2.5s, and then in the 1 to 200, whatever, probably about 170 to 200 grams per centimeter of torque, somewhere again in the 17,000 to 21,000 RPMs, 23,000 RPMs. Those do well in the 2.5 to 2.8, potentially 2.9, but not too many of slot cars run on this track at over 3 or over. It's not to say that there can't be a first, that could happen. So, all right, well, now we've got that axle polished up. It was sitting in there for a little while with a little bit of darkness on it. So there, now our axle's polished up, and all we have to do to break this in, since we already have some braid there, whether we're going to keep this braid or not, just set it up on our test bench here and go ahead and slowly bring this in under some no load conditions. So we'll knock that out there at about, I don't know, 5 volts right now. We'll CRC 226. We'll run that for a good solid, several 15 minutes or so. Then we'll come up to 8. Then we'll finally come up to 12. Maybe one more round of CRC 226 for lubrication, but it's already quieted itself out very nicely. And so we will continue to break that in under no load. Oh, and here's a little tip. I don't know if I've shown this one before. Maybe I have. If you love NSR braid as much as I do, keep it in the package and put a little slit along the side of it. And then you've got yourself a little tape receptacle. Just slide it out. It's copper wound, and then you just pull what you need and cut. And in this instance, by the way, when we go to take apart that front guide and look, normally with most guides, you can just kind of guesstimate when you get good at this and approximate an inch or so and cut. That is not the case here. We have kind of like the best parts of how a Carrera guide holds on to the braid itself, combined with the amazing engineering feat of keeping this guide low in place. And I don't know how long those braids are that are on there right now. So we'll continue on with a couple of things to note here. I'm going to try and maintain the pinion that's on there, and I'm going to go 31. But the interesting thing is that this gear is 4.4 millimeters in width, or in thickness, I should say. It's 17.8, Nominal, we call it 18 millimeters. So this is 18 millimeters as well. That's a slot at 31, but what it's not is, it's not 4.4 millimeters thick. So ironically, that 0.5 spacer that I put away, I put right back here on the end, if you can see. So there's now a 3.9 millimeter plus 0.5, bringing us back to 4.4 that matches the thickness. So we'll have our internal spacer that comes native with the car on this side in between here, but will still rest appropriately, because I believe, depending on what happens and where I need to build that up, there's the possibility to add it to the inside, and there's the possibility to add it to the outside. I haven't figured it out yet. You might point out and say, well, Tony, if this is the wheel side, why does it matter whether there's more space? It doesn't. It obviously doesn't. I have the motor, as you can hear in the background, still breaking in, and I can't remember whether this gear is turned this way or turned this way in terms of the thickness. If the thickness side rests in that direction and it needs to meet the pinion in a certain place, then that extra 0.5 will matter. If it doesn't, then I won't. But I've slipped it on there as a reminder to check it, because I just, some Sidewinder cars, the thick part of the gear where the 0.9 set screw is on the inside, and sometimes it's on the outside. So it may not matter. It may not matter at all. I think based on the way that this motor pod is and where it rests against it, I think it could be fine, and I won't need to have that on there. I would only need to have that on there if it needed to add up and build more space on that side. So we'll find out, but I slipped it on there. I did have to polish the axle up really good just to slip this on here. This is somewhere in the 3/32 axle range, but it's this MRSlotcar axle seems slightly larger, and that is a snug fit for that slotted. But what we're also going to do while we have the time, while that motor's breaking in, we can review what we did with the motor and the intake pipes and some of the other bits, where I had mentioned that, again, what was probably aluminum stanchions for the mirrors, they were done in matte and silver, matte black and silver, and the metallic silver, pardon me. So those bits are good and done. This was done in all metallic silver. Oh, there's a little brush clicked right there on that MX-16. And then again, I had said that the roll cage for these shadows at different times were just really worn and not necessarily bright chrome. So I chose to go with light gray, and I might take a dry brush of this metallic silver and come back and hit it. I haven't decided. It's another piece of that leans backwards towards the motor. And then we've got bright and shiny, these other little connector arms that land on the back of the car at an angle to the wing, obviously in metallic. So now we're left with these guys, and really this is a neat little thing. They rest in here quite nicely when you set them up in here, and so there's no real reason to kind of go too crazy on them. You can glue them from the bottom because of all these extensions that rest down through here. You just got to make sure you have this in the right direction. Believe it or not, that's facing the front. And then if you get a good look at the car, or you go to Cloverleaf Racing or Slot Car Corner or LEB or any of these places that you see right here in front of you, you want to get a look, it's up, down, up, down, up, down. So you've got a smaller pipe followed by a larger pipe, and it just continues the pattern all the way around. So I think it's like small, large, small, large, small, large, small, large, so that way the offsetting is similar on both sides, where you end up with this funky looking stack on those spots for those pipes, those intake pipes. So we might as well put it together. My eyes tell me, again, you should test fit it one more time just to be sure, right? And not only does it obviously only go one way, because Ernie had a great design where you can't put it in wrong. You can only put this inside of here one way. So once you prove that's the way that it goes in there, right? And you can see how it shines through the top. So then take it back, leave it oriented in that position so you know you have those two tabs. That two tab is the front, right? So those two tabs are the front on there. And again, in case you didn't see them, there are two tabs there, and the triangle hits the back there. So that's the case. Now, what I'm seeing here from having the car blown up on my screen and seeing it now is the fact that, whoa, Jackie decided to join us for a second. Thanks, bud. Thanks for coming. So it's short, tall, short, tall, short, tall, short, tall. So it just continues around the car. You don't go short, tall, short, tall, short, tall, short, tall. You don't want those two tall ones to mirror each other. You want the tall ones to be staggered with each other, so that the tall ones end up here and here diagonal from each other, and the short ones end up stretched diagonally even further from each other. So if we take the first one and just put it in place, you'll notice that you can't do it on that surface because it's just going to jiggle around and hit the bottom. So I'm just going to hold it up in the air, and then I'm going to touch a little bit of super glue to the bottom of it and just get it in there. And it does kind of look like a funky stack. You know, they're all going to be jammed next to each other. They're all going to be quite close next to each other, but they're all going to fit. Obviously, the car has been put together numerous times in the factory and others who did this white kit. So they're all going to fit, so you got to start somewhere. So you might as well start in the back and start to work your way forward. My hands are probably going to be in the way, and I'm not going to bore everybody with, you know, how exactly I'm going to do it, but I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to let it rest on there and try and get it flat as possible, and then drop a little bit of glue right there on the bottom. And it won't take much, right? It won't take much. Eyeball it, make sure it's straight to your liking. Maybe take your finger away, settle it down to where you want it to be. Try and show it on camera. Settle it to where you want it to be. That looks eyeball straight to me, from both front to back and side to side, and it should be setting now. And we can always come back and hit it with a little bit more each time. And then continue on, and we'll get stack, 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 and then we'll have a full 8 stack. And there you have it. Everything locked into place beautifully. We got our stack, just like we were aiming for. There we go. So as it turns out, it is the gear side and not the spacer side, the thick side, that is locked in here. So we don't need to add any extra spacing. It is simply the solidly mounted wheel that's next. But it is a little bit tricky to get this spacer back on here because you've got to get it still in between there and the gear, if I'm not mistaken, because that does hold that in place. And then you've got to slide this into your gear, and then you can see the fitment. Easy for me to do. You can now see the fitment where that spacer is in there that comes native with the car, and then our 31-tooth slotted gear lines up. So that's good. That means we don't have to worry about using this spacer because nothing matters on this side. You can put the wheel exactly where you want it on this side. So now we just want to get a decent estimation of that axle being centered, so we can, I'm going to just eyeball it. I don't know if I loosened these up enough to do that. Clearly there's plenty to get on there on that side, and looks like the spacer should do the job on that side. So I think it's time to put this back together. We can soft set this with our 0.9. I'm not so sure. No, that's making contact. We might be dealing with a different issue altogether. We might be dealing with the thickness of the gear, so we might have a different reason to change spacing. Again, you have to be able to do this from a capability standpoint. That's 1.1 millimeters in width. The slotted gear is probably going to be about 1.3, 1.4. There you go. So that's what happened. So now we've got to actually disassemble, again, but for a different reason, and figure out logically, how big that spacer is that we're going to grab with our finger as best we can, and there it is. We're going to figure out the size of this spacer. That is a 1.1 millimeter spacer. So we have gone from a 1.2 millimeter wide gear, or maybe even a 1.1, depending on what you think, 1.1, to a 1.4, 1.5. So we've gained 0.4 millimeters. And so, you know, we definitely do not need to have a spacer that size. And so if this spacer, like we said, was approximately Oh, we're saying too many numbers that are close to each other. We're saying that's 1.1, but we just lost 0.4 millimeters. Well, maybe we have a different reason to have this 0.5 millimeter spacer. Maybe this 0.5 millimeter spacer right here is going to go on there and hold our gear in a slightly different place. So let's try that approach instead. Get that on there. And now we had a reason to pull this out. Now let's see what happens when we slide this axle back and slip our gear in and see just where gear mesh is now. Looks pretty good now. And now the thing is, we want to make sure we're clearing the plastic on both sides. And I'd say we are clearing the plastic on both sides with that spacer. So, boy, that's a nice, that's pretty stinking good right there. So there we go. So now we're going to go back to now our original goal now, which was to center the axle. Now we'll take our 0.9 and we'll lock that gear in place, hoping that that's a good spot to be. Now we also can already see that we have room to play where we're hitting both sides of the plastic there. Obviously, we don't want to hit the plastic at all, but now we can at least see that. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to just snug down. Oh, again, got to go back to the 1.3, right? Go to the 1.3. Just going to put that wheel on there loose enough so we can move it and figure out where it needs to rest. I think we are already too wide. Too wide. So we got to come in on that side already. Now we'll tighten that down for a second and check for fitment again here. I don't like something. I don't like some sound I just heard. Oh, well, sorry. Sorry, I'm doing the wrong thing. I'm pressing the gear against the side of the chassis. So forget about that. Let's come inside to where that's going to rest and push down and see if that's going inside the body. And it is. And it is. There we go. So that's a good fitment spot there. Now what we do want to do in the other sense of it is we're going to put aside the original MRSlotcar spacer. We don't want to get confused about the fact that we need now the non-gear side. And we are going to go to the native spacer that was provided to us, knowing that we expect Ernie's design, had we left it stock, to be a perfect fit to get that little thousandths of play and press this essentially almost right up against it, and it should set the tire right where we want it to be. So I'm hoping that works out for us. We'll find out here momentarily. Got my little thousandths of play that we're looking for. So let's just lock this down a second and see what it looks like underneath the body. Maybe we'll be okay. Maybe we won't. Let's see. I think we're going to be okay. But you can't see I'm doing it underneath the scope, but magnifying glass. But you want to pretend there's body float going on, and you want to push that tire up underneath that wheel well in an exaggerated fashion and see if you're making contact. So maybe I can even move the other one back out, but I'd say we're there. We're good. So guess what? Now we can do change the braid on the guide because it's just too heavy for what I need. And then we're ready to kind of run this guy under load for a little bit and get it out of the track. This is exciting. Ernie, this is amazing stuff. There's not a lot to do to this car from a tuning perspective. Find the gear ratio you want. Maybe change the braid if you think that braid is too thick or too hard. And wow, go ahead and get it out there. We can work on maybe if we want to put some float screws in here. You know, there's all these 4 float screw points in here that match up to spots under the body so that you can have body float pivot points if you like that sort of thing. But this is going to be really cool. This is going to be a quick one, hopefully, here, and we'll mess with our pod. And boy, this is already got some lubrication now in the front. This is awesome. Oh, and as a quick reminder, those are CB44XFs. We're trying to go with the same look and height. Now, again, it's hard to compare an off-rim tire with a tire that's on the rim. So that should be thicker. You're trying to be like for like, but that's about the same height as the way the car rests if it had the original tire. I'm sure plenty of folks have taken this apart, like I said before. So I think you do have to take everything off of here to be able to get to it. Certainly, I think you have the capabilities to slide out the eyelets without taking it apart if you want to, but you can't change the braids without doing that. Have to change. You have to do that. But I'm just going to kind of play around here for a minute, see how easy it is to slide out the eyelets. Number one, I like that it's not. I can tell you right now, I love, even though I've got them lined up in the spaces where they can come out, technically there's these two little gaps to slide in, or maybe that's just for the eyelets themselves, not to get caught. I love that they're in there snug. So let's not go in that direction. Let's start by unscrewing. If it's new to you, then we'll learn it together. These are clearly holding the eyelets down. A little bit of JB Weld or something on those, so it'll help keep them snug even when I put them back in here. Now you'll notice immediately, you can't do much still. You have to disengage all 3 points. Take your time, we don't want to strip anything. And then we'll notice this screw doesn't go down nearly as much. And we also can take note as to whether or not it comes out. And I don't think we want to take it out if it's not going to come out. It'll help us keep it in mind. So there's that wonderful, neat system that we've got where these two screws here are clearly these two screws here are holding the braid in place, probably helping keep some tension on the eyelets. And then this is keeping the guide's pivot point. But the real pivot point, the real genius of this guide is that it perfectly fits in there. And the backside of this right here, this rudder, is what's running along, where you can see that the MRSlotcar team has graciously already lubricated that for you a little bit right there. So let's just break it down through the middle here and see what we have to do. Maybe we can start on the top. Maybe we can get the eyelets out that way. But I think I'm going to go from underneath. I think it's just going to be a little bit easier for me to deal with, especially since I'm on camera. So again, remember the exercise here is we need to know how long a piece of braid we need to cut to refit. We need to know how long a piece of braid that we're going to refit into here, because we want to, we want to put our NSR. We want to put our NSR soft braid on here to get down low on my track. So looks like it's weaved in there pretty nicely. Let's just take it out completely. Let's turn it over on this side and do the exact same trick and get our eyelet out of that side where there's no tension on the eyelets now. No tension at all on the eyelets because of the fact that this rudder point and the top of it is not on there. So there you go. So really cool, really sophisticated, 9 millimeters to my measure. So at this point in time, we can see how it's on there, and we should be able to simply slide this out. I don't think there's anything else going on with this. I think the rest of this, take a quick peek underneath the magnifying glass. Nope, I'm not seeing anything else. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to go for it. I'm going to slide this braid out. There we go. So now let's get a measure, because I would say it's highly likely that this is not the size piece. Honestly, it's not that much different. If I had eyeballed it, I probably would have had enough. You can see the mark right here where the eyelet is slipped over it. So because you can see that, if I had cut it just a little bit shorter, it would have gotten in there. But that's definitely a longer piece than I would normally cut if I was just eyeballing braid and plugging it in there. Doesn't mean this braid won't be used. Before I just toss it aside, we'll just stay in millimeters, 26.3. Okay, I'm doing all of this off camera apparently. I'm trying this new view, and you guys can rat me out on this new view if it's not getting the job done. Yeah, I cut an even larger piece, but that's all right. Let's try and put it back in. Let's try and put this piece back in. See just how easy it is to slip it in. How about we move the light? No, let's not move the light. Let's move the magnifying glass. Oh, quite easy. Quite easy. It didn't take much effort to get it underneath it. Now it's thinner braid too, so we might be, recognizing the eyelet situation and seeing how that goes. I think if you look closely, if you remember how the braid was, I believe that we want the braid to go down and the eyelet's going to press it downward. So, we can just go ahead and fold according to Ernie's system here and see what it looks like. Well, there you go. That wasn't too complicated. It's slot cards. It shouldn't be complicated, folks. Right? All right. Super easy. There you go. Let's put it back together. And so like many people would do with a guide, like a slotting plus guide or something, that you would come down from the top. I'm going to do the same thing here. Let's come in from the sides and let's press that braid down to where we want it to be so that our eyelet can go in there nicely and shape the rest of that, right? That's only going to help us not wreck the good work that we just did right there, right? We want that eyelet to go in there very nicely and round it against that piece without hurting it. So let's go ahead and do that. A little bit weird. I'm going to do it from underneath the car because it's just the only logical way that I see it. Let's see how I'm going to do this. I'm probably going to block this whole entire view, but maybe not. Maybe not. All right. Let's see. I'm in there, sort of, kind of. As I pull the other one out, I'm going to have to fix. So let's just see. Let's just see if there's a way that I can now, with my flathead, press that on through. There you go. A wire's dangling down here, but I promise you that's not the braid. That's the wire from the eyelet that made its way through. Or some of it is that. Some of it might be the braid, some of it might be the wire, but it does look like that one went in place properly. Do you like what I think and propose will be a nice advantage with this? So let's do the same thing here. Let's just see how awkward I can be with this little bit. There we go. Flathead, see if we can get that in there. Ooh, don't come out. All right, we can finish the rest of it from the top side as long as it's in there far enough. One of them is, one of them isn't. One of them is and one of them isn't. I think it's this guy that's not in as far as it needs to be. There we go. All right. Look at that. I will fix that. You can see I didn't get the curl point there as far as I should have, but that's pretty neat. That is pretty neat. We are really, we're in there. We're in there. We're exactly where we should be. Both of them are all the way in there. And we've still got that same pivot point. Again, there's no way to put a spacer in here, so you just want to make sure, maybe perhaps that the top of that rudder point, let's get some better light. Just so that the top of that rudder point right there is not catching on that, that's your body post. That's your body post screw right there, right? You just want to make sure there's no such thing as any guide spacers or anything going on here, right? So we've got that in there. So now we should just, let's turn our block over and make our life easier and put it back on. I do want to just double check under the magnifying glass that I did not move the braids to a point where they're not all the way deep to be able to be held by the screws. And they're not, they're in there. They're in there, so we can put our rudder back on here and still lined up with our screws in there. I'm not going to put it on there tight at all yet. I just want to see it. Just want to see it first. Love our magnetic wear. We love our magnetic wear tools. Well, if they're used appropriately, of course, by the user. If the end user can't seem to keep them appropriately and actually land in the hole, then you can't blame the tool. Yes, yes, that is a good point. And there you have it. There you have it. Other than some minor adjustments, those fit snug and land right there against the brass. Land right there against the copper. And by the way, who knows? They very well may be landing against the edge of the brass eyelet too. So, and boom, there you go. There's your same action. You're all good. It is, certainly something that needs to be lubricated. It is something out of the way. It is definitely something that, might need a little bit of refinement. It seems to want to be making some sort of catch sound now that I'll have to look closer. I think I see what it is. There's these two plastic points right here that are the stopping points for the rudder in the back. I think one of the eyelets is just not pushed in all the way and it's catching it. So I'm really excited to see this design. I think it's something special on this car. So as it turns out, like I said, what it actually is I'm actually hitting the injection molding point of this rounded piece. You can even hear it when I come by. And now I've just grabbed it with my, well, maybe I fixed it. Maybe I just caught it and fixed it with my thumb. I was trying to scratch that little extra piece of plastic away, and now I think I've got it. And so we certainly can check our fitment here. Maybe this can be a little bit tighter. I don't know. It needs to be. It certainly wasn't all the way in. I'm sure there's a stopping point. I'm sure there's a logical stopping point that you just can't go any further. And boom, there we go. There we go. That's going to be a nice little system. Might lubricate it a little bit differently. I might figure out where else it might need lubrication. But otherwise, it looks pretty good. And yeah, I like it. So now we head to the rolling road for some test under load. All right, well, we're getting ourselves here. We're getting ourselves positioned. We're under some load here. Very little load, 5 volts. Get ourselves up to 12 volts. And just got to be careful of one thing. If you have a rolling road or you have any kind of test bench environment, just make sure you've really got that where you want to in the front. You're leaning against that guide on this car. It's very, very low. And so that's great. But you just want to make sure that you don't cause damage to it from the, inertia and the force that's going on at the front of that car. So just get it where you want to and then tap it down on the rolling road. So we're almost ready to put this car on the track. We'll throw the white kit body on there as is. So now that part 2 is done and all the little bits have been handled, all the little bits and parts have been painted and handled, and we've got some basic tuning done, we're going to go ahead and get some weight in that car next in part 3, and we're going to get it out on that track, albeit in the white kit, and then I'll take you through how I painted and liveried the car in the parts after that. Thanks for joining. Until next time, Hobbit Racing. Enjoy the slot car pull of the trigger.
If you don't subscribe to Hobbit Racing, I'll poke you with my staff. Pokey, pokey, pokey.
She will poke you with her staff.
Pokey!